Welcome back to the Lords of Lore Podcast Network. You're listening to an episode of Unabashed. I'm your host, Matt. I use he, him pronouns, and I am joined today by...
Me, I am Ochi.
What pronouns do you use, Ochi?
And then my pronouns would be he, him as well.
Right on. And what are your nouns? How do you describe yourself as a person?
Just a guy would be a long-winded pronoun or noun, but I guess just a creative mind, guy who likes to make stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, whichever way, visual, music, doesn't matter.
Absolutely. I like to tell people how I know the guest. And I think maybe with the exception of Rhubar, who is on the second episode of this show, I've probably, out of the people I've had on, I've known you the longest. I think I met Rhubar a few months before I met you. He may have even introduced us, if I'm remembering correctly. This is back when, for some reason, you had your head shaved, all except the middle.
I wouldn't be surprised. It was at a McDonald's and you were freestyling, and I remember I didn't want to rap, and then you were like, why doesn't this dude want to rap? Obviously he has no bars, and then it made you rap more.
Yeah, it was the material idea, which is funny because we actually went on to make rap music together at some point in time. You did in fact have bars.
Oh no, like literally spurred on from the get-go.
Yeah. I think that's like a pretty good representation of our friendship, I'd say. Me fucking just poking the bear.
Word, especially with that, because yeah, like literally if you think about it, the moment I met you, it started with you freestyling at a McDonald's.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Okay, but no, we're not talking about rap today. Today we're talking about as the video watchers would see, and for audio listeners, our background right now is I would describe it as an astronaut coming out of some trippy red room, but people might notice this is from the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is a topic you've brought to Unabashed today. So we'll move straight into the elevator pitch. So again, for listeners to the show, maybe new listeners, the elevator pitch is where we pretend I am some big wig Hollywood director, or in this case, we won't pretend I'm a close friend of Ochi. You're trying to convince me to watch this movie, which funny enough, you did. So this will be like a weird exercise of reliving that moment. But so yeah, you're trying to sell me on this property for me to watch it. How would you do so?
Okay, this is hard. Okay, there's no other film that covers as much ground as this one and does as much with what it has, or what it uses, I guess.
Okay.
Because like, let's say it covers a lot of ground time-wise. That I'll leave it at that. But basically, I don't know where you're gonna get that. I don't. And it's hard to go further without like, giving too much.
Mm-hmm.
But really, scope is the big thing. And then I guess technically, like, is flawless. Like,
Okay.
in terms of what it does, it gets its point across. It was made in like 67, I think.
Right.
But everything it does, like technique-wise, stands the test of time. Directors go back to those techniques even still. Fucking Interstellar right there.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it asks questions. So like it makes you think, and it's something that you leave the watch, wanting more.
Yeah. one of the things that stuck out to me when you were given that pitch is that this came out before the moon landing. And for people who may not know, it's highly well, speculated might be the right word, that the US government hired Stanley Kubrick to stage the moon landing. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. Is that something you believe actually?
No, because like basically, I don't think the U.S. government, with the way they do not fund NASA, would put like $1 billion into like 80 documentaries just to prove, yeah, we did this, we did this, we did this.
Yeah,
Like, but
for the
like,
moral victory.
no, from watching it and basically understanding that it was released at the time, I get it. Like, but too many documentaries.
Yeah, that's even more impressive to me that this came out before there was footage of that. Like, how did he know that's what things would look like? You know?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, he like consulted and stuff, but it's like
Yeah.
he guessed.
And what's the story there too? Is that there's a book about this movie that was being written at the same time as the film was being produced?
Well, I know that Arthur C. Clarke already wrote 2001. Like that was written and that's what they had to go off of. And then I know that they rewrote like a screenplay for the movie.
Okay.
Yeah. So other than that, I don't know if there was like another piece of media. Otherwise, that would have been crazy because I know that they like amassed a bunch of information just to make everything production wise.
Nice. Yeah, I think there's something there where like the timeline was like weird, or I'm maybe getting it confused with another element of the production, but yeah, super like a devoted craftsman when it came to making this movie. Uh, so what's your first experience with it? Is it just something you stumbled across? Is it just like one of those, cult classics that you had to go back and watch, or how did you first like come across it?
Um, well, it was around university time. Like I was in film class. And then basically we were going through like a little intro to Kubrick through The Shining.
Okay.
And then like I remember I already saw my first Kubrick movie was Full Metal Jacket in like seventh or eighth grade.
Wow.
And I remember that it messed me up.
Yeah.
It messed me up. It was not it was not the right time. But I remember film wise, it was just like it was different.
Yeah.
It was different. So basically, I was doing like my little Kubrick study where I was like watching his movies, and I jumped to 2001 first because like sci-fi.
Right.
Um, and basically from there, I was like, wow, like he like out of the park. You get it.
Yeah. Would you say this is like the gold standard for sci-fi movies?
No, no, not because it isn't like the Grail,
Okay.
but because it is like
Ah.
it's almost untouchable in terms of there's no other film that kind of has the same ambitions, so it's kind of not fair to compare it to like other things
Would you say
unless something tries.
yeah, like I definitely think like Interstellar tries for sure. Do you think it comes close or no? Because you also got me to watch that
um
movie too.
yeah, no, because like you're right in that way because there's like thematic parallels and it feels like really like it feels like related in a way like the
Mm-hmm.
movie's like it comes from that lineage, but in the same way like it almost it can be compared to it, but because it relies so much on the source material, like because it uses so many techniques that are from 2001, like especially with like space scenes, it's basically like the same thing. One uses models, one uses CGI.
Right.
Like like I I don't know, because it's kind of like it's like watching the same thing replicated, like, and so it can't reach those same heights, and it doesn't ask the same questions. Like it raises cool points, and like, and the funny thing is like there's those like Neil deGrasse Tyson, or like all those videos like they're like this is terrible, this is like awful,
Yeah.
but like but like a 2001 does that, and because it raises different questions, and like I would say not bigger, but just like just interesting ones.
Mhm.
Like it avoids that, and it just does it better. So like, still, I don't know.
Yeah. What because I think like the climax of, or like the real question or the story that they're trying to tell with Interstellar is that moment where he's watching his daughter grow up because of like the difference in time. I think that's like the real emotional crutch that the film sort of leans on, is like, what is it like to give up life in pursuit of, saving the people you've left behind, type of thing. Whereas I think 2001, that's not even, that question's not asked at all. It's like, what the fuck is life anyways? Like, I don't know. I feel like they're so different in that
Exactly.
way.
It's
Yeah.
so much. Yeah, it's still cool because they're both crazy concepts. Like, I mean, Nolan's basically done time like
Yeah.
a million times, but like, yeah, 2001 basically asks like the big questions, like about existence, technology, like in life.
And so what is your interpretation of the ending? Because as long as this film has been around, I don't think there's like a concrete answer, in that this is the message we're trying to relay with the film. It's obviously spawned so many different conversations on what the ending of the movie means, what like the journey to get there means. Because it's almost like there's three different films taking place. Obviously, with the opening of the film, there's like, I think the, what's that ape called? Like the Moon Watcher or Stargazer or something. I think that ape has a name. But then we get into like the actual film, with the astronauts and with HAL 9000, and then the end of the film where it just turns into something completely different. Um, so what do you think is like the actual, like, is your interpretation of the ending um different than other ones you've seen, or do you have any like feelings towards there being three separate stories, or like what is your interpretation of all that?
Well, definitely it feels like there's three different stories because like just so like stylistically they're differently, but you have that one through line because the same question is raised right at the beginning, and like it's unavoidable, and then at the end it's not answered, like it's raised again, and it's like I don't know. Like I almost forgot. Like I spaced out and forgot the questions. Literally just thinking about it again.
Yeah. No, that's fine. But I think like, so sometimes like when I leave a movie, if I've watched it in the theater, I'm watching it at home, and I take like the next day to sort of think about it. And so there's only like a handful of movies that I come away from like weeks later. I'm like, damn, I didn't think of that. That's like a wild concept to introduce via film. One for me I always talk about is like Blade Runner 2049, where it's like there's so many moments in that film where I'm just like, wow, that moment, that scene itself asks a question. But this whole movie, like, it got to a point where I was like, what the fuck was the point of the movie? Not even like, what was the point of this character's motive, or like, why would the technology do that? Like, what is that message? It's like, why did someone make this? Like, it's so like the concepts are so like nebulous, and like, like what do you think this film's contribution to that type of discussion really is? Like, what is your takeaway from it as a whole, I guess?
I think that it's exactly that. I think it's that it's one of those films where the question being raised, honestly, you can approach it from so many angles, but you're going to it's on it's nebulous, like as you say, like it's endless. Like you can't answer it. You can like you can think you have new insight, but it's just gonna lead you to a new question.
Right.
So it's like basic. I would say that it is probably the best piece of like this medium, like film, to do that. And then with sci-fi in general, to
Mhm.
take something that incorporates science to ask those questions, like it should be the gold standard, but it can't be because like it
Yeah, because
just
it's too
like
hard to
the
get to that
scope is too
plateau.
big.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair.
But it's something to reach to.
Yeah.
That's what its contribution is.
Ah. It's going back to like the beginning of the film. I don't know if this is a question more so than just a comment, but like the way he's able to tell the story of that specific uh it's an ape, right? You know,
Yeah.
gaining sentience and starting this like without words, obviously. Um and that sort of then immediately transitioning to like the far future. um I don't know, that's always just really interested me, like because when I first like sat down to watch it, I'd never seen this scene before. So I'm like expecting like this movie about space, and it starts with that, and I'm like, am I watching the right movie? But it's, I don't know, it's just so beautiful how that transition is like seamless where it really shouldn't be. Yeah. What was your first like immediate thoughts like opening the movie that way?
Honestly, the first thing, like when you bring this up, is that the movie itself starts with a couple minutes of just darkness.
Yeah.
Like that's fair to say. Um, and when when you go into what the movie's trying to get across, the scope of what it's doing, it makes perfect sense. And it's like from there, it's already different because how do you get away with that?
Yeah. You know, today.
Like like and basically, but that's the thing. That's the thing. It's not like it's trying to be justified. And then it starts at that point, like with the I'm pretty sure you're right about it being Moon Watcher or something along those lines.
Right.
And then and then yeah, and then it transitions like again, like no compromises. Like
Yeah.
it does not matter. He'll like he'll lead the way, Kubrick, and you just gotta follow.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into some of these unabashed questions. And I'm sure I'll sprinkle some random ones in as we go along. Actually, no, before that, I wanted to ask what your interpretation of the monoliths actually are. Because I don't know if you saw this, but last year there was these monoliths that were being found across the world. I think there was one in Nevada and one somewhere in Europe. Um, I think they turned out to be like art installations, but they were very like reminiscent of the monoliths from this movie. Was that something you saw? Did it scare you? And what is your actual
Oh,
interpretation on stuff like that?
I mean, they look the exact same. So it's like, I see what you're trying to do. A lot of effort. And like, the funny thing is when you really think about it, if you're just like hiking in the middle of Nevada somewhere and like you stumble across it, your first thought is going to be very similar to what, like, to the same way the monolith is presented. Like,
Right.
because you don't understand it. And like as far as the interpretation, I guess it would be like it would be some form of intelligence. Like it would be obviously it like it's explained that it like that it was left like left or like left there. but in terms of what it is, like, yeah, it's hard to say because like I feel like it would have to be like the essence of intelligent or just something to move forward civilization to the next step.
Mm,
Because at first, like you see it with the Moon Watcher and the apes, and then that's then right afterwards you see the transition to using tools, and then so on and so forth.
right. Yeah. No, I'm not like just you speaking there, I started thinking about like the pyramids, and obviously there's a bunch of like wild conspiracy theories about like the pyramids and their formation being like too perfect, or Stonehenge for that example. I always think it's fun like if a movie pulls on those concepts. You see it with like lower quality films, and when I say lower, I mean lower, like Transformers Dark Side of the Moon, where they like where like they pull on these like real world conspiracy theories to like be the fuel behind the concept of the movie. But I think obviously this interpretation is more interesting because I think it makes you at least ask questions about the origins of our society and our jumps in technology. Whether they're influenced or not. It's certainly a good metaphor at the very least to symbolize that.
Well, it's kind of like if you think, because the Ten Commandments, they were supposed to be on a slab,
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
like, like something about like an artifact that's supposed to pass on like wisdom just to like to get you to the next step.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
That what you just
you
described
have to
sounds
think where
like an
to
Assassin's Creed storyline. It's like
what.
sounds like an Assassin's Creed game with like, yeah, the Ten Commandments for actually like apples
Oh
of
my,
Eden.
yo,
So,
no word of a lie it could have been
yeah,
like literally you just get that like that big slab and it just
yeah,
beams coming from it. Like,
yeah. What okay, I'm totally going off track here, but like what like you said like the beams and stuff. But what is your actual definition of like omnipotence in a human form? Because I watched this movie I often recommend. It's called The Man from Earth. I think I maybe even showed it to you, but I can't remember. It basically takes
I no,
what?
we've both seen this movie
Okay.
separately and
Okay.
realized that we've like, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting because like they're in for anyone who hasn't seen the film, it's just a man who doesn't age, or an immortal man who's been around since um prehistoric times basically, and what his life would look like today. Um and it's interesting because they all assume that he would be like this super intelligent being who knows everything, and he says the fields are advancing faster than one man, and that's what I am. I'm just a man, can keep up. It's impossible to be like a biology professor that's like super, like the highest uh echelon of that field. It's just like impossible. So for me, I'm like, I always look at that movie as an example of like, is it even possible, even if you touch the sparkly light stone thing? Like what would your interpretation of that be, having all the knowledge in the world? Like,
Well, like, well, with him he's like immortal, but like even with all the time in the world, you can't gain all the knowledge in the world.
right.
With all the knowledge in the world, like I don't know if that would be beneficial because either like if you don't have a certain level of agency or like ability to do anything with that knowledge, I feel like you'll definitely just crumble under the fact that you know so many things. And like I feel like a lot of things will just be like inevitable, like formulas just be like, yeah, life's like this. You got to deal with this.
Yeah. uh my nephew the other day was talking about superpowers, and was talking about like, oh, reading people's minds would be the best superpower. And I was sitting there thinking like, unless you could turn it off, like if it was just like all the time, everyone's thoughts, you couldn't, like, you'd collapse. Like just like that overwhelming input. And I think the same of like having all the information of the world at once would just be like, no thanks. I didn't need to know those things. I preferred it before, type of thing. It's a burden.
That's the thing. And I think part of that agency is like the ability to turn it off. Cause like you're
Yeah.
right. Cause like it's like literally is it would be too much unless you're a superhuman like that's built for that.
Yeah. No one's built that way. Okay, we'll get into some of the unabashed questions here. So we talked a lot about things you love about the movie, but what is like the one thing about the property or the sort of culture of the movie that you love the most? Like what is the thing that not brought you to it but brings you back?
Okay. Probably production design and like just specific, like there's a moment in the movie where you kind of forget when it's made,
Yeah, for sure.
and literally you just get lost in it. And like at that moment, considering that they're in space and everything is like, and what's going on, like the way it looks, certain moments, like literally background,
Yeah.
like that that's when I get lost in it, and I'm like, that's the reason I decided to watch this.
Yeah. I definitely, from that point of view, like I like when I was watching it, I wasn't even thinking like, holy shit, 19, like this is before Star Wars. Like, and they're doing this. It's, yeah, it's incredible. I think that's one of like the most beautiful things about film is like when it's over and you're like, oh yeah, that wasn't real. Like those are people behind the scenes making those effects happen. Those are miniatures, they're not real ships, but while you were watching the film and when you go back to the film, it still feels like it is. I think that's like that's movie magic, I guess, is the best way to phrase it. But yeah, this movie for sure does that. I didn't even think about it until you brought it up. Like just consumed it, I guess.
No, like I guess that's like, this is like my movie that has that element, because it's like you have to get lost in it, like almost, if if you're gonna watch it basically wanting like a CGI fest, Michael Bay explosion, like film, it's not gonna happen, and you are gonna be pissed,
Yeah.
but that's on you, and fuck you. But like but like literally, it's that's kind of what makes it that it isn't those things.
Right. Yeah. It's sort of the first Star Trek movie, uh, the motion picture. Um, I know when it came out, people were upset with the, I guess, the level of action that was in it, compared to what had happened before in like the TV show. But I think I've heard before that like a lot of people wanted the response to Star Wars as that Star Trek movie. And I think in the interpretation of the filmmakers was very much this is our response to 2001: A Space Odyssey, just sort of like this slow crawling, more so a question of humanity than it is like a space epic, which I think Star Wars is more fantasy and space, whereas Star Trek in 2001 are more like what does space do to humans, which I think is definitely the more interesting question, although sometimes might feel less engaging.
Like it can only be engaging if you're willing to like meet it halfway,
Right.
like, because otherwise there's not really there's not a spectacle to get into until you're already invested.
Yeah, for sure. Um, okay. If there's is there one specific character? Um, there's not many to choose from, obviously, but is there one specifically you relate to more so than others?
Um, it is incredibly hard because there's like five. Um, yeah, I'm gonna go for how. Just like um,
Say
just no,
that.
because it's funny. It's something that takes multiple viewings.
Mhm.
Dude's just trying to survive, man. Like, like,
But see, I love that because
uh,
that raises the question of like, Hal's not a human, it's an AI. But at this point in the
exactly.
future, does that not make them worthy of wanting to survive? Like, if it has sentience, shouldn't it also have the will to survive? And what weighs the astronauts' will to survive higher than Hal's? You know, like
Exactly. And
yeah,
it didn't, the same questions are raised. It didn't choose to exist. It didn't choose to understand the concept of death.
right,
And yet it does, and now it wants to fight. And so,
yeah,
and and not necessarily fight. It's literally it was it was it was placed in a situation where like you only it's a fight or flight, like
right.
preservation or be destroyed, and literally it wasn't their choice.
And I mean, you could say that of most humanity. Wasn't their choice, but they're put in yeah.
Exactly. And
So
so like, but it's funny, you're also it's like being empathetic to technology. Why? But also why not? Because of the concept of sentience. Like if it
yeah,
understands, like it's it's weird. And also because like the other characters in the story truly they they're almost like is the term foils, but they play to one side or one emotion.
right. Yeah, yeah. I definitely feel like they're more like they could have been anybody. Who they are is not important. It's more so how they convey the message of the story. Like anyone could be like, I don't think if you switch the astronauts, it's Dave and I can't remember the other guy. Um, I don't know if you change them with any other characters we see in the movie, if it makes a difference. I think Hal is the central
Exactly. It's
character.
more
Yeah.
yeah, it's more
Yeah.
so how they interact with how they interact with the situation they're faced with. And it's really it has less to do with their personalities and just more to do with like them being astronauts in,
Yeah.
in space doing the thing.
I actually want to bring up going back to like movie magic and set design and stuff like that. I don't think I've told this story on the network yet. So this one time I was partaking in a little bit of the Mexiwan, um, and I wanted to watch one of my favorite films, the theatrical cut of the Two Towers, Lord of the Rings. And I couldn't get past the first 5 minutes of the movie because there's a scene where Gandalf, he's like fighting the Balrog and he's like falling down the mine shaft in Moria, the crack in the earth, and the Balrog's falling, this fiery demon, and his sword like spins towards him and he catches it. And I was so under the influence that I was like, that's fucking Sir Ian McKellen falling and catching a sword and fighting a demon, and it looks so real. I'm like, how the fuck did they do this? I can't figure this out. And it was just, I had to like replay it. I remember just like mind numbingly just rewinding 30 seconds and being like, what the fuck? Like looking for like wires or indications of being like hung up. And I just had to accept that it was magical. Ian McKellen actually did this stunt, which is obviously not the truth, but I couldn't accept anything else because it looks so good. And so I just turned the movie off and went to sleep and let my a clearer mind. I haven't watched it since actually, so I don't know.
Damn.
Yeah, yeah, it was an experience. Anyways, so we talked about things you love, the character you relate most to. Do you have a single moment or scene in the film that sticks out above all the others?
um last part of the film ending. because you really, every time I watch it, I don't understand. I like, you can interpret it so many different ways. What you're seeing is not like what you saw for the other like 2.5 hours. Like,
Yeah.
and at the same time, it's so like, it's weird. It's almost silent. It's like it's calm. It's like it's not normal. Like
Yeah,
it's
like, and that's why I said earlier, like it feels like a different film in that respect. Because it's like, here's this character, but he's somewhere where you don't recognize and you're not sure how they got there. It almost feels like a dreamlike state. Um, and watching, I remember being so uncomfortable as I was watching the film by myself. I had like a projector at the time, and just being like, what the actual fuck what does it mean? And trying to figure it out, and then eventually just coming to the conclusion that like, I don't know if I'm supposed to really understand what this means, but it was nice to look at, and it certainly made me think about stuff. But any subsequent viewing of the film, I'm like, I don't get it. Like I'm still the first. And it's funny because like obviously the way that scene ends with like the child is like, that's how I fucking feel right now. I don't understand anything I'm seeing, but it's happening, and I'm like, I'm okay with it. Does that make sense? Like,
no, you're exactly right. Because like in that moment where there's like you're basically there in that place, like you don't understand anything about the situation, and you see him like a character you followed, but you don't understand like why you're seeing them, where you're seeing them, like you don't get like you think you understand the journey to that point, and yet you reach that place and it's like this doesn't make sense,
yeah,
and yet like you see him and almost in a way like there's like the old version like, and it's not like he looks very at ease like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just weird. It's weird. Like, but I already said it felt calming. Like, so it's already weird. Like, it's
yeah.
just uneasy. Like, it's not normal.
That scene, like, this is the dumbest. I keep Transformers and now this, but there's like that scene specifically with like the older version of himself reminded me of the movie Zathura, like the spiritual successor
I
to
okay, yeah,
Jumanji. Yeah, where there's
yeah.
like two different versions of the kid. And but seeing it in this context, it was more so like the concept of like that version of you has also been here, and this is where they're at now, and now you're coming. It's like a weird loop that you can't escape type of thing. That made me so uncomfortable. Like I was like, I don't like I don't know. And like you say, like the lack of ease both of those characters are portraying. Like I don't know, in either of those situations, to be the young version of yourself and see the older version of yourself, and vice versa, is super uncomfortable, regardless of where they're at. I don't
Yeah, and I
know.
mean, like, if it was at home, that would be one thing, but also like in like the most foreign of places after like a journey like you should not comprehend, it makes even less sense.
Yeah, yeah. It's just so strange. But so that is then your favorite move, your favorite moment. Just like, it's tough not to be when it's this film. Obviously, there's like beautiful cinematic shots, and like the one behind us here. But for that, like that moment is definitely the biggest takeaway, because like it's just so open for interpretation. Yeah, I don't know. Weird.
Yeah, I mean, there are other moments. Literally, whenever the like the same uneasiness is from the ending is brought up in the movie, which happens like multiple times. That's special because you don't get it replicated in the same way.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so obviously it's open to interpretation. Is there things about the movie or that moment specifically, or the movie at large, that you think people actually like they're wrong, like something you've seen and you're like, no, or like I don't share the same opinion as this majority or group of or community or group or whatever the case is.
Well, I think um not really, because really when people try to interpret the ending, there seems to be like a consensus that like it's ambiguous.
Yeah.
Don't like, or like it's, yeah, or like it's next level in that way. The only thing that comes to mind is like the notion, I guess it's funny, of Hal as um a bad character
Okay.
or like inherently evil. Like, and I was, and it like, when I think about that, I want to say it feels like it's almost inherently human, but that's wrong. It's
But
not.
don't you
It's
feel
not. It's
like
an AI. But
let's go ahead, sorry.
in terms of like, in terms of emotion, in terms of like will for self-preservation, like those are, it's displaying human traits. You're hating the human side that it's portraying.
Yeah.
And it's like it was built. It didn't choose that. So,
I think
very
though
weird.
the notion that Hal is evil is an inherent human thing that humans who watch the film put onto Hal. And like I think I more agree with you that it's something with sentience that wants to survive, and I don't know how you could fault it for that. But obviously, in the film, it serves like it has an antagonistic role, but it would be childish to
Yeah,
think
but it
that
didn't
like
shoot first. It didn't shoot first.
that's
Well,
true.
like,
Well,
I mean, okay, like it shot first, but like because it was being plotted on, um, like how knew the situation I had, and like it was kill or be killed.
yeah, yeah, I definitely. But that's what I'm saying is like I think people like I think it's easier when you look at things as black and white as humans, like good and evil. And I think it's easier for people to be like, Hal's the bad guy, than be like, what's the real reason? You know? Because I think it's easier to be like, oh, technology's bad, opposed to like, what is the humanity behind the robot? Wouldn't I act the same type of thing? And yeah, I don't know. I think it's just easier to answer that question with nope, bad guy, stamp it, which I think is also like a funny thing the movie brings up with that like philosophical conversation. Yeah. Um, and how, is the character you relate to the most? Is there any sympathy on your end for the astronauts and the people who send them on the mission? Are you like, is there any part of you that like this is avoidable, or like I feel bad for these guys, or well, what's your feelings on that?
No, that's the thing. It's like the whole movie is inherently like cold and cynical, because I don't place blame on the astronauts. If anything, they were not sneaky enough when they were plotting. Like if they you know
Yeah.
if they wanted things to turn out differently. But like essentially every decision was taken um with their best interest in mind, like the person who took them, and like a, a lot of the time they were like, I wouldn't say simple decisions, but they were more so like self-preservation versus destruction. Like
Yeah.
government sends you to space, the reasons self-preservation for humanity or destruction.
Right.
The humans, just trying to, cover themselves, same thing. How? Same thing.
Same
So
thing.
no
Yeah.
one's at fault for like in terms of looking out for their interests.
Yeah, that's well
So.
put. Um, okay, so I know you not to be like a emotionally expressive person. Um, but you're a pretty stoic person, I'd say. But has this property ever moved you to tears?
Um, no, not to tears, but it's definitely made me have like a very big sense of emotion. Probably like wonder
Okay.
or like curiosity, like because when you see certain moments for the first time, like just that idea, you're out hiking and you see a monolith, like, and in the context of the film, like what that means and how it's portrayed, the music, everything, like,
Yeah.
and then just other moments like that, it really it hits you in a certain way.
Okay. Quick question. If you were out hiking and you saw a monolith, would you touch it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Pause. Like, I mean, because it's the same notion because humans do see a monolith in that film, and it's like it's that sense like when I saw those photos, you have the same like sense of how when
Mhm.
like how did you make that? How did you make it look like that? How did you place it there? Like, but I do worry about like if it was made of like a foreign material or like metal, like what if you just like get diseases right off the bat from touching it,
Yeah.
or like radiation? Um, but yes, out of scientific curiosity, I'll touch it.
I love it. Um, so we talked about your misconceptions and the emotions you've gotten from the film. Is there something you hate about the film at all? Is there any one moment that you're like, I wish that wasn't in there?
um, nope. I mean, if anything, I wish I like my only wish is that Kubrick, RIP, was alive to remake it, like with modern technology.
Yeah.
And like, but the thing is, that doesn't need to happen. Like it only if that movie didn't exist.
Right.
Like if that was the first of its kind to come out, because the movie it's cemented the way it is.
Yeah. Uh, I think that might be the first time on the show that we've got like a it's perfect as is, leave it type of thing. So that's cool.
I mean, it's as
Yeah.
far as sci-fi films, it's untouchable.
Yeah.
It's number one.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would have a hard time hearing a convincing argument against it. Now it's definitely not my favorite, like not even close to my favorite science fiction film. But I think for me, that's because like this is not a film like on Christmas Eve, I'll rewatch Revenge of the Sith, which is far and away probably one of the most depressing Star Wars films. Um, just based off the way it ends. But this is not a movie I would revisit unless I was in the right headspace to be like, I'm okay with being existential over the next couple days
Yeah.
because this was like it's tougher to consume in that same way.
Oh no, I had to think about it. Like I was thinking of my top five films, and I was like, these are not like rewatch every week or every couple of month
Right.
films.
Yeah.
They're just too heavy for those reasons. Like
Exactly.
you're
Yeah.
not trying to see Godfather all the time, you know?
Yeah. So you talked about the sense of wonder or curiosity you gain, but has anything else that this property helped you with or you learned from by consuming it that you've like realized you took away from it or came up in like your everyday life?
Um, I would say definitely not in like a direct way, more so you can hope that you pull like influence in a meaningful way from like things like the production design and the way certain things are just like crafted and made to look, especially from like a visual standpoint, like the way the spacesuits, the spaceship and all the technology looks, like incorporating that level to other things. But it's hard because it's like it's so specific
Yeah.
to like that film, that genre, and that type of like making that type of thing that it's hard to pull from it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. It's that age-long quest for perfection in that sort of aesthetic way. Uh that's interesting, yeah. Okay, we're gonna move into the we call the trial by fire here. So these will be a little bit funner, silly questions. But you know, if you want to go in depth to explain them, please do. So first, would you get a tattoo of this property? And do you have any tattoos?
I do not have any tattoos yet. Thinking of tattoos. Would I get a tattoo of this property? Yes. Have I thought of one? No.
Okay.
Like, but I'm sure I'm sure you could think of something based off of it or like an image from it. That would be crazy.
Yeah. Super sick. I'm trying to like go through some right now, but like I don't know. There's so many good like scenes and cinematic things in the movie that it'd be hard to like put it into one concise like image. You know what I mean? Without it being like, here's the Odyssey or here's how type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it would you'd have to like pull elements of it almost.
Yeah. Okay, so how likely are you to bring up the property on a first date? So it's a very open question because obviously it depends on who you're on a date with. But if you had to give it like out of this many dates, how often would this come up? Is it 0? Is it 10?
Let's see. 1 out of 10, I would say I give it like a fair 20% shot.
Okay. Okay.
Like
That's
it's
yeah.
not something that will never come out. Like if the topic of films come out, and then I gotta be like, yeah, yeah, I really like this movie. like, like
Yeah. No, this is one of my favorite questions to ask because it's always, well, it depends. But it's like, how bad do you want to talk about it type of thing? Oh, which leads into my next question. Is how often do you get to talk about the movie?
okay, well that's the thing. Not like I feel like sci-fi movies are just like so few, or at least recently,
Or
aside
at
from
least
Star
good
Wars.
ones are few and far between.
Yeah, okay, yeah, you'll get like those random like ones that go straight to Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
Like, but no, it's okay. I literally just spaced out.
Yeah, well, do you get to talk about it
Like,
often or
oh no. Well, like literally, yeah. Because there's so few like current movies like that people are really talking about sci-fi wise, there's not really like a moment to bring it up. Like you think
yeah.
about it, a new movie comes out, it's not it really doesn't have anything to do with like that type of genre or even sci-fi. So it's like, yeah, did you see Tenet? Yeah, man, it kind of reminded me of 2000. And then, nah.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't happen like that. Or like,
Yeah. Well, I think Interstellar is actually the one exception where it's like that
yeah,
was a
okay, yeah,
conversation for sure.
yeah, basically, yeah. With Interstellar, you could like have a smooth transition to like, yeah, that reminded me. But like, I can't think of anything like honestly like that's came out recently that makes me think of it in that way.
Mhm.
It's, you know what? Maybe Blade Runner 2049 like made me feel like, yo, this is, I love this. And
Yeah, I think
so
there's
that
similar
kind of made
themes
me,
of like what does it mean to be human? Definitely like with sleeves, what are they called? Skin, what are they called? I can't even remember. But
um
synthetic humans.
yeah, are they, I think they're all called replicants, but I can't remember.
Replicants. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um
I was thinking they use like a
but
slur for them called skin jobs. It's like
yeah,
graffiti
yeah,
on his
and
door.
then
Yeah.
like her Skinner on
Yeah.
his like apartment
Yeah,
room.
yeah, yeah.
like
Terrible.
like no, and the thing is like literally the same question with Hal is raised with Joy. The idea of self-preservation for
Oh yeah.
technology.
Yeah. Great movies. Okay. Going into still keeping on the theme of like relationships, but if someone you're seeing, you sat them down, or let's say we'll give you a couple scenarios. So let's say you've been seeing someone for a while and you're like, I really want you to see this movie. This is like a really important movie to me. And they watch it and they're like, what the fuck? I hated that. Not even like what the fuck, that was weird or ambiguous, but like that was awful. What would your reaction be? Is that a deal breaker?
Um, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Everyone has a right to their opinion. But the thing is, from that point forward, I won't trust your opinion on certain things. like
The lead up to that drop right there is incredible. Everyone's has the right to an opinion, even if it's wrong or
like,
useless to me, for sure.
like I'm just saying, like really, like because I can, the thing is I can get why someone wouldn't like the film.
Mhm.
And for those reasons, I can't trust
Right.
your taste
Because
100%.
yeah, because in
Like,
your perception, like the reasons people wouldn't like the film are things that are not things you enjoy. Like if someone didn't like it because it was like a slow burn movie that asked philosophical question opposed to having action scenes, you'd be like, well, I'm not into movies that don't ask questions and have a bunch of action scenes, a la Michael Bay Transformers type of thing. So yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. This again, this series of questions is like my favorite to answer because it's such good insight to what you value about yourself, but as well as in a partner. Um, Now, would that be the same if you were like on a first date and 20% of them end up with you talking about this film, and the person was like, "Yeah, I hate that movie." Is there a second date or?
um, well, okay, yo, there's gonna be more questions. There's gonna be
Yeah.
follow up. Um, like maybe an interrogate, nah, but like, like, um, but no, that will lead to questions, and then like I need to know what you do like.
Yeah.
If you don't like this, what else? What else? Tell me what you like.
What
That's
you
gonna
just said is
replace
the
this.
most common answer for this question. It's why, and okay, then what are you into? It gets super like
like,
combative, which I maybe that's not the right approach, but I don't think it's the wrong approach necessarily either. I think
it's not
yeah,
wrong.
it ain't wrong. Um, if you could go on the mission, or if you could visit that plane or place we don't really know what it is, would you?
Yes, around the age of like late 30s, early 40s.
Oh wow, okay. Why the specific age?
um, I really got to be. I really have to have like lived a bit more. Like let's see. Yeah, 12 more years of life. Just at least, I don't know why, but like just going on that type of journey at like 30, like 38, 37 seems easier than now.
Yeah,
Just
for
like
sure.
right now I see things like things going bad early. They go bad, but they would go bad earlier.
Okay.
Now I might make it to the end.
Right.
Or like later.
Right. I see what you're saying. Interesting. Yeah, usually the question I ask is if you could live in this world, would you? But because this theoretically takes place in our world, it's a little bit different of a question in this respect. And I already asked you if you would touch the monolith, so I think it's a pretty good indication of yes. How much money, relating to the earlier questions, how much money would you take to be paid to never watch or talk about this property ever again? So one of the people you went on a date with is just like, I couldn't stand when you talked about this and interrogated me. I'm also a multimillionaire or billionaire or trillionaire, depending on your answer. And I never want you to talk to anybody like that again. How much money would it take?
Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. My first thought is like it might have to work like one of these new NBA contracts. Or like you signed me to like 4 years, 200 mil.
Yeah.
And then like the fourth year or like 3 years in, I like if I'm stressed, we might have to break it. We might have to push for like an extension with a raise, like
yeah, renegotiating the contract. I like
yeah,
that
because
answer, but to stay in the spirit of the question, if you had to make the one-time decision of how much money for the rest of your life to no longer enjoy or talk about this, you can still think about it, but you can't watch it and you can't talk about it. If it was just one lump sum with no contract negotiations.
See, I'm trying to think realistically.
And the person who's offering the money, they have the full ability to be like, no, that's too high, or like a realistic amount of money, I guess, is the point. Or I guess in your perspective, anything lower is no longer worth it.
Damn, I want to know what other people said to this question because
This,
I'm so afraid of lowballing it.
I think there's so much variance with people's questions. Like some people say, I need $1 million because, I mean, for the rest of my life, I would need a significant.
$1 million, though?
That's what I'm saying, though. But it's all hypothetical. But
yeah,
and I think the last Cam, the last guest we had on, they said like $2,000. And I was like, really? And then when I phrased the question differently, it was like way higher. But yeah. I guess like the main point of the question though is how, like, if this property is a substantial significance to your overall happiness, how much is that worth to you?
I'm saying you're giving me at least 100,000.
100,000, okay.
At least, and this is me being sad. Like I'm taking the check and like, and I'm still giving you a death glare. Like,
okay, so I'd like to bargain a little bit here too. If I offer you 90,000, are you saying no?
Oh, I'm snatching the check and I'm walking away. Like,
yeah, it's funny to me though, because like, as you know, like there are so many different properties I'm obsessed with in different amounts, I guess is the right word. Like there's some things I often bring up Princess Mononoke, which is like a singular movie that I'm like very much obsessed with. But like if someone was like, I'll give you $5,000 to never bring that up again, I couldn't say no because it's only one movie I have to avoid. You know what I mean? And like I have so many other things I enjoy that I'm like, for $5,000, like I might, maybe not that film specifically, but if they're like, never talk about Gundam again, I'm sick of you, I'll be like, give me like $10,000 and like we could work something out. But yeah, I know it's a good I like asking the question.
I mean, $5,000 for like One Piece.
Wow. But see, that's a big amount of stuff. There's like hundreds of episodes.
Word, but I mean, that would be much easier to give up. Just
Okay.
like, because there's almost too much that it's just like one piece of like
Yeah, you're not going to go through it all again. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like, I'll just give that up. I'll keep the rest.
That's a good point
Like
too.
that
I didn't
buys
think of
me
that
some
that way.
equity.
Yeah. So this would definitely be one of your like desert island movies then.
Yeah, well, like the thing is, like, if I brought like the movies I think are the best, like I will not be happy on that island. No, no, no. Like,
Super
so it's
depressed
like,
all the time.
yeah, so I don't think I'll be trying to have like a film like yeah, this is like a late night film, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you just want to like watch when like your day's over, like you can really get lost in. If I'm on a desert island and I got to think about survival all day and even all night a little bit, it probably can't.
Yeah.
Like I'll be sad. Like if I had 90K on that island, like that might work out. Like
Yeah.
if I can just think about it but not have to watch it, that's great.
Okay, I got you. That's funny. Um, okay, so this might actually be interesting in this for this property. Let's say some studio comes across, I don't know if you actually participate in communities about this film, but they come across something you post and they go, we really like your take on 2001. We want you to spearhead. We're going to remake this film. We want to do it justice, but we don't want to go to Nolan. We don't want to go to somebody else. They're like, we want you. Is that an opportunity you're taking? And is it one you would take without financial compensation?
The first thing I'm gonna say is yes,
Okay.
but the conditions are messed up and it won't be made. Um, Basically, I like obviously if I'm spearheading it, I obviously get to choose like who's like the executive producer, like the other producers. Um, and I would definitely need like we would need the essence of Kubrick. We would need his family
Oh
there.
wow.
Like yeah, like
They would
I'm
have to
saying.
sign off on it for you to feel comfortable.
Oh no, I mean like we would need direction.
Oh,
I I got trust because honestly, because his wife helped him with his
okay.
films, and even his daughter
Oh,
was
okay.
I think was in some like early ones.
Right.
So it's like there, and then I would have to choose the director. I'm already calling that it would be Denis,
I don't
directing
think there's
Dune,
anything wrong with that choice.
and we might need a decade of production. And then the thing is that I kind of just want it to come out as like a private screening for me and some of the homies and family. Like that's the thing. Like it's I also don't want it to come out to the world. It doesn't deserve that. Like
Oh, okay.
like
You feel like you'd be doing the original a disservice?
yes, like I would definitely love to see an updated version of it with like trusted individuals making it
Mm-hmm.
with like years of like years going into developing it. But at the same time, I have zero faith that it would do it justice because it's
Oh,
just
okay.
not done by him at this. Like it's weird.
Right. And would you make it like
So
a
it's like,
shot for shot remake, or would you try to add new elements?
see, that's the fucked up thing. When you do a shot for shot remake, you can still find a way to get criticized or shat on.
Yeah.
Zack Snyder with The Watchmen did that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Like, well, okay, well, actually, okay.
So
After
see, like you
rereading
and
it,
I are on an
you realize
island.
that he truly left. He did leave elements out, but in
Yeah,
terms of he was going for a shot for shot,
right.
and like it did not like critically go well.
See, and,
Like
I, and I'm of a different mind where I think that's probably one of the greatest comic book adaptations, for sure
you're
the
not
most
wrong there.
faithful. And I know like
You're
you and
not wrong
I
there.
adore that movie, but I can recognize people who don't. But
Also, it depends on the cut. I feel like
for sure, yeah.
because like I don't know if I ever saw like the standard one that came out in theaters.
I think that's the only one I've seen. I don't know if I've ever watched the director's cut. I've read the novel, and I love the elements that are in there, but I almost appreciate them on the same plateau in that I think his version and the original have things that like I don't know if you could pull those off in a movie and they be as successful as they were in the comic book. Yeah, I don't know.
It does add to it. Like I remember, there's like a director's cut, I think, and then there might be an ultimate edition, or maybe just one of them. But I remember there's a 4 hour version
Right.
that has as much as they can absolutely do, and like it's good. It's good for what it tries to accomplish, but at the same time, it was going to be open to criticism if you're going like that hard, like
Right.
to recreate it. Like that's why like I would, what are you supposed to add to 2000? What can you add to make it better?
Yeah.
What can I add to make it better? What can you add to make it better?
It begs the
Like
question, right? Like you're saying, like if it's the Grail, does it require remaking? I know you probably think not, and there are some people though that like this could work for a more modern audience if it wasn't as. uh and I don't really think the film is that dated, to be honest. I think the special effects still hold up in that endearing, this is old type of way, but still like technically incredible. But you know, um,
I
this could be more smooth in a modern interpretation. But is that necessary? I don't know.
that's the thing. It would honestly be, if it did happen, like in a perfect world, like in a perfect world, it wouldn't be remade. Just some AIs would remaster it. Like,
Yeah.
so like fucking like some computer intelligence would figure out a way to make the monkeys in the at the beginning either real monkeys or CGI monkeys, like just
Uh
fix
Planet of the Apes type
and then just like
CGI.
do those cleanups, but not remake the whole movie.
Yeah.
Because like otherwise, it does stand up.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Is there anything I guess you would like to say about this film before we wrap up here?
let me think. Honestly, not really, other than it covers a lot of ground. Like again, super, super broad film, really, really big scope. And it asks questions that no other movie asks in the same way. Like, and where else can you get that if no other
Yeah.
film does it? Like what? Like,
Yeah. Have you read the novel?
I have not, even though like my worry is that it will take away some of the nuance of rewatching the film if like I have like a thorough understanding of what it means like on paper. But
Yeah.
because he wrote a sequel as well. So
Yeah.
like
Oh, I meant to ask about that as well. Like there are sequels to the movie that were made, not directed by him, I don't think. Have you ever watched those? I think it's 2010 something or other.
um it is funny because I watched 2001, and then obviously I saw like shortly afterwards that there was a movie 2010 that was made like in the 80s, and like I told myself for years I would not watch it just due to the fact it's not Kubrick. I don't want to know where the film leaves off if it's not going to be like of the source, but it's not he adapted it, so it's not really his property. But it is.
So I just looked up to make sure it was made at the same time as the movie was made, and they did collaborate. So although it is Arthur C. Clarke's novel, it is both of their property made
Oh,
concurrently.
really?
Yeah.
Like the novel for 2001 was made at the same time as the film?
Yeah. So it's not like an adaptation. It's like I don't even know what you would call that, a companion piece too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If anything, that just adds a layer of intrigue because there's more explanation on the page.
Yeah.
And honestly, that makes me have to read. Like, but yeah, like, because literally, yeah, that if they were made in tandem with each other, that's honestly that's interesting.
Yeah. Going back to 2010 though. So did you end up watching it?
Yeah. That's the thing. Years later, I did,
And
and like questions are answered. Is it a bad movie? No. And it's like I almost kind of try to do like the Men in Black, like just pretend I didn't see it. Like,
yeah.
like in a way, like that the like it helps or like actually it doesn't help. Like it answers questions, but they're not meant to be answered in a way.
Okay.
And at the same time, you're still gonna be thinking about them regardless. So like, do I suggest anyone to watch 2010? No. Like not because it's a bad movie,
Yeah.
but just because like um yeah, you want those questions to be completely up to your interpretation. Like still a pretty good film. Like
Yeah. I had the same sort of
did
hesitation.
you?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
And because what I read online was essentially what you're saying is that it's not a bad film, or like it doesn't feel like we should make a sequel to that highly successful film 20 years later. Like it, to the people who were posting about it, to them it didn't feel that way, but it just felt like it didn't need to be made. Um, which I had the same
And
hesitations going into like 2049, being like, there's questions that the original, states or throws out there that I don't necessarily want concrete answers to. And I think that film specifically does such a good job at not answering those questions and giving, whichever way you fall on whether or not Deckard's a replicant. I think it gives you evidence both ways. And so it still becomes, the question just gets richer. There's more to go off of, which I think is like the way to do it. I'm also reminded of like the original Planet of the Apes, which has one of the greatest endings of all, film history. But there's sequels to that movie that people don't know about, and they're great movies. And I think they get that same sort of thing as like, well, who needed 4 more Planet of the Apes movies?
no,
But
but that's almost the thing where you're not even wrong. Like you're almost like if anything, you're right. I saw the first Planet of the Apes and was like, yo, this is really good.
yeah,
Like for its time. And like it was really focused. And then the sequels ask more questions, but then you lose focus as there are more entries. And so like that was a case where it didn't need to be done 2010, but then you have the new trilogy where you're almost coming at it from another angle,
yeah,
and like then it warrants exploration. Same thing with Blade Runner 2049, where like you basically you approach it from a new lens again. Like you don't rehash the same information like this is chapter 2.
right.
Like it's just it's a new story in that world, and like you do it well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, agreed. And I think like the movies we're talking about are uniquely sci-fi or exclusively sci-fi movies. And I think this genre, more so than others, has the ability to ask questions that you wouldn't normally get in different genres of film, even if they are the same sort of dramatic, serious movies. I don't think they have the ability to ask questions that you wouldn't normally come across in your everyday life because, other movies in that same dramatic vein can be like mundane in that way. Whereas these movies, like the scope can be so big and the questions are so small in comparison. It's like the question is, what does it mean to be human? I mean, you can watch all the films in the world, just straight dramatic films, and not be asked that same thing because you're experiencing it. But with sci-fi,
Yeah, it's in
yeah,
the background.
yeah, with sci-fi, it's so front and center, even though it's not what the films are being sold as. It's like, oh, space and astronauts, but it's like, these deeper concepts. It's, yeah, I don't know. I think that's why I'm drawn to sci-fi too.
Well, also it's like, and it's in a way that it's based in reality, but it's almost abstract because we don't understand it yet. Like with
Right.
technology and space exploration, like we get the concepts behind it, but basically when we watch like when we watch these movies and they get into space, interact with these things, from that point we need to go with it. Like
Yeah.
unless you're studying this, like
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, like, again, going back to Interstellar, I think that's the one thing that's not like at the forefront enough, is like the question the film was trying to pose is sort of behind like the cinematic of the movie. And there are characters making these, like, and I think it's the opposite of 2001, where it's like who these people are actually matters because that affects their decision making. Whereas I think 2001 sort of takes a step back and it's like it doesn't matter who any of these people are. The same sort of things would have occurred, just based off, like,
yeah.
yeah, human nature type of thing, or nature, I guess you could say. Yeah.
And that's the weird thing about the movie is that like they take away that personality or that element. So like it's all about like the concept of nature and technology and stuff because there's no backstory or like two kids and wife at home for one of the pilots,
Right.
to rely off of or like steer you with it. Like it raises a question, but only that question really, with only that environment, and that's what you go off of.
Yeah. Yeah. I Yeah, see, and it's been so long since I've actually sat down and watched this movie, but I'm still like the wheels are turning now, which I think is like the point, I guess. But yeah. Anyways, thanks for coming on the show. Um, if people want to pick your brain and talk to you about 2001: The Space Odyssey, where can they find you online?
Well, if they want to do that, I would be totally surprised, man. Like, because it is a gem. But it would be at Ochi no Bueno for basically everything. Mostly Instagram, Twitter, but I do not use that.
Fair enough. Yeah, I see you like once a month, like one of my posts, and then disappear.
Yo, literally, like Twitter is where the memes come first, so I'll never delete it just so I can keep seeing videos and
Stay
like
up
funny
with the
jokes.
culture. Yeah.
But like, but at the same time, like I can't believe that there was a time where I actually did tweet. Like, I can't imagine because like I can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It just feels like my own personal bubble where, like, I put things out into like the ether and they just, like, that's it. It's like a journal for me. As, hey, what are the Oilers doing? Or or I feel depressed. It's like the range of things I tweet is fast, but people can contact you on Instagram. Um, Obviously, you can follow me on my art page. I keep making down below, as you see. And yeah, check out our main show every Tuesday with Luca, Will, and I as we break down a nerdy topic regarding fantasy and sci-fi. Check out for this show every other Friday where we have a guest on, and also look out for adventures where we play tabletop role-playing games, and you can catch that on here. And thanks for watching.